Royal guards are known across the world for their serious expressions and perfect discipline. People often talk about how they stand still for long hours, even when the weather changes from warm sunlight to sudden rain. Crowds gather around them, especially in places like Buckingham Palace, to see how still and focused they remain. Many tourists even try to get a reaction from them. Some wave, some make funny faces, some ask questions just to see if the guard will blink or smile. But the guards do not respond because their job is special. They represent tradition, duty, and a quiet strength that has lasted for many years. When people look at a royal guard, they see the tall hat, the bright uniform, and the serious expression. They often forget that behind all of that is a real human being, someone with a family, with dreams, with memories, and with a heart that feels just like anyone else's. But because of their role, the public rarely gets to see that side of them. So whenever a guard shows even the smallest bit of emotion or kindness, it becomes a moment people remember for their whole lives. Many visitors arrive with excitement, hoping to experience these guards for themselves. Parents lift their children to see better. Friends pose for photos. Travelers from faraway countries smile as they watch the guards march in perfect formation. There is something magical about the way the guards move. Every step is identical. Every turn is sharp and precise. It looks almost like a dance, but a very disciplined one. The guards' training teaches them how to remain focused no matter what is happening around them. They practice for hours so they can stand still without showing discomfort. Their job is part of a long tradition that has been passed down for generations. Even though the guards keep a straight face, people around them often feel a sense of respect and admiration. Some visitors whisper to each other, wondering how the guards manage to stay still for so long. Others laugh softly as children try their best to make a guard smile. Many tourists hold their breath, waiting to see if something unexpected will happen. Most of the time, nothing does. The guards continue their duty with calm expressions. But on rare occasions, something small and meaningful occurs, something that reveals the gentle heart behind the uniform. On one bright afternoon, the area around the palace was especially busy. It was a day filled with tourists, school groups, and families enjoying the sunshine. The atmosphere felt light and cheerful. People snapped photos, children pointed excitedly, and the murmur of friendly conversations filled the air. A cool breeze carried the scent of nearby gardens, adding to the peaceful charm of the moment. The guards stood in their usual positions, tall and motionless, watching over everything with quiet focus. Among the crowd was a little girl holding a bright red balloon shaped like a heart. Her parents walked beside her, smiling and pointing at the palace. The girl's eyes were wide with curiosity as she looked at the guards. She squeezed her balloon tightly, afraid to let it go. To her, the guards looked like magical characters from a storybook. Their tall hats and serious faces amazed her. She waved shyly, not expecting any response. She didn't get one, of course, but she didn't seem disappointed. She was simply happy to be there. But then, a sudden gust of wind blew through the courtyard. The balloon slipped out of her small hands and floated upward. The girl gasped and reached out as it drifted away. People around her noticed her panic and tried to comfort her, but the balloon continued rising into the sky. Tears began to form in her eyes. She wasn't upset because the balloon was expensive. She was upset because it had been a gift from her grandmother earlier that morning, a special surprise that she had been excited to show everyone. The crowd grew quieter. Some people tried to distract the girl with kind words, but she kept looking at the sky, watching her balloon disappear. Her small shoulders shook as she cried softly. Her parents knelt down to hug her. But nothing seemed to help. The guards, standing nearby, continued their duty as usual, but the atmosphere had shifted. Even adults felt a little sad watching the girl cry. Moments like this remind people how small events can feel very big to a child. Then something unexpected happened. One of the guards, who had been standing near the front, noticed the little girl. Though he was not allowed to show emotion or break formation without reason, he understood the situation. He could see how upset she was, and he sensed that she needed comfort. Guards are trained to stay calm and serious, but they are also trained to care about the safety and well-being of people around them. In that moment, he made a small choice that would soon become a memory the family would cherish forever. A soft toy bear sat on the ground near the girl. She had been holding it earlier, but when she ran after her balloon, it had slipped from her arm. The guard, without making any dramatic movement, carefully stepped forward in a precise and controlled manner. His posture remained professional, but the intention behind his action was gentle. He leaned down just enough to pick up the little bear. The crowd grew silent as they watched this rare, unexpected act. When he straightened up, he held the toy in one hand with a steady grip. The girl looked up through her tears and saw what he was holding. Her crying slowed as confusion turned to surprise. Very quietly, with a calm and respectful motion, the guard extended his hand and returned the bear to her. He didn't smile and he didn't say anything. He simply offered the toy with a sense of kindness that needed no words. The girl blinked in amazement. Slowly, a small smile appeared on her face as she hugged the bear tightly. Her parents stared in disbelief, touched by the guard's thoughtfulness. The crowd, still silent, began to smile as well. Some people whispered softly, telling each other how rare it was to see a guard break character. Others took photos not to mock the moment, but to remember the kindness they had just witnessed. The guard returned to his position, standing tall and focused once again. But something had changed around him. The air felt warmer, the people felt closer, and the little girl, now calm and comforted, stayed by her parents' side with her toy bear held against her chest. She kept glancing at the guard, her eyes filled with gratitude that she couldn't put into words. People left that day with a story they would tell for years. Not about the palace or the photos they took, but about a simple act of kindness from someone who was not expected to show any emotion at all. It reminded everyone that even in the strictest traditions, there is always room for humanity. And sometimes, the smallest gesture, like picking up a toy for a crying child, becomes the brightest memory of all. The story of the royal guards often seems simple from the outside. People see the uniform, the tall hat, and the still posture, and they think the guards' whole day is the same routine. But their work is far more demanding than it appears. Every day brings new situations, unexpected moments, and people from all around the world who gather to watch them. Some come out of respect, some out of curiosity, and some simply because seeing the guards is something they always dreamed of doing on their visit. Days can be long for the guards. They stand for hours, keeping their posture straight and their focus sharp. Even though they are surrounded by crowds, laughter, and sometimes noise, they stay calm and professional. It takes a special kind of strength to do this. They learn to control their reactions, their facial expressions, and even their smallest movements. People often wonder how they stay so still, but the guards train for this with great dedication. Despite their serious appearance, they are not cold or distant. They see what happens around them. They notice the good moments, the funny ones, and even the small troubles that people face. They simply do not show their reactions because their job requires discipline. But just because they do not show emotion on their faces does not mean they do not feel anything. Their hearts are just as warm and caring as anyone else's. On a warm afternoon, when crowds were especially large, a tourist group arrived from different parts of the world. Families walked together, taking photos and pointing at the palace's beautiful architecture. Children ran excitedly, their steps filled with energy and curiosity. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the day. The guards stood watchfully, maintaining their firm and steady posture. But the peaceful scene soon changed as an unexpected moment unfolded, one that would reveal another gentle side of the guards. In the middle of the crowd, a man in a wheelchair moved slowly toward the front. His family pushed him carefully, trying not to bump into anyone. The man was elderly, with silver hair and a soft, kind face. He wore a small pin on his jacket, something that looked meaningful, perhaps a memory from his younger days. His hands were slightly shaky, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. He had traveled a long way for this visit, and his family had planned this moment especially for him. As they reached the front, the crowd shifted to give them space. People noticed how important this was for him and stepped aside with respect. The man's family positioned him where he could see the guard clearly. For a moment, he simply stared ahead with a thoughtful expression, as if remembering something from long ago. Then, with slow and careful movement, he raised his hand in a respectful salute. The gesture was simple, but it carried deep meaning. It was not the salute of someone trying to get attention or entertain a crowd. It was the salute of someone who understood discipline, honor, and tradition. Someone who had lived through experiences that shaped who he was. Some people in the crowd recognized this and watched quietly, their expressions softening. Royal guards are trained not to respond to gestures from visitors, no matter how sincere they might seem. It is part of their duty to remain neutral, focused, and consistent. But this moment felt different. The elderly man's salute was filled with genuine respect, and the guard could feel the weight of it. The man was not trying to challenge him or make him laugh. He was honoring him. The guard stood still for a moment longer, thinking. His posture remained upright, his face unchanged, but something in the atmosphere shifted. The crowd sensed it too. Everyone felt a quiet connection forming, a moment that seemed to pause time. Then, in a rare and meaningful act, the guard moved his right hand in a smooth and precise motion and returned the salute. It was not dramatic. It was not exaggerated. It was calm, respectful, and sincere, just like the man's own gesture. The entire crowd instantly fell silent. The man's family gasped softly. The elderly man himself froze for a moment, as if he couldn't believe what he had just seen. Then his expression softened, and his eyes glistened with emotion. The salute lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds felt powerful. The crowd around them was deeply moved. Some people placed their hands on their hearts without thinking. Others exchanged warm smiles with strangers nearby. It became clear that this was not just a simple salute between two people. It was a quiet exchange of respect between two individuals who understood something deeper about duty and honor. The guard's movements remained controlled, and he quickly returned to his still position. His face resumed the usual calm and serious expression. But the moment had already happened, and nothing could erase the memory of it. The elderly man lowered his hand slowly, but his smile stayed on his face. It was a gentle smile, full of gratitude. His family leaned close to him, whispering kind words and touching his shoulder with affection. The crowd, though silent at first, eventually began speaking softly among themselves. People talked about how touching the moment had been, and how rare it was to witness such a gesture. Some captured small videos or photos, not to share for attention, but to remember something that felt meaningful and pure. Even those who didn't fully understand the significance felt the warmth of the moment. For the elderly man, this was more than a simple interaction. It was a moment he would carry in his heart forever. Perhaps he had once served in a disciplined role himself, or perhaps he simply admired the guard's dedication. Whatever his story was, the salute he received became a gift, a reminder that respect still exists in its purest form. For the guard, the moment may have lasted only a few seconds, but it meant something to him too. Guards are trained to remain outwardly still, but they are not trained to ignore kindness or respect when they see it. Sometimes, even in the most formal traditions, humanity finds a way to shine through. As the crowd slowly continued with their day, the gentle moment stayed in the air like a warm memory. People talked about it for the rest of the afternoon. Some said it was the highlight of their visit. Others said it restored their faith in simple acts of kindness. Many walked away with a sense of peace, thinking about how meaningful small gestures can be. And the guard, returning to his steady posture, continued his duty with calm focus. The day moved forward. More visitors came, more photos were taken, more laughter filled the air. But deep inside, a quiet story had just been written, one that would be told and retold by everyone who witnessed it. A story of respect, a story of dignity, a story that reminded people that even those who seem unmovable can show warmth when the moment calls for it. This was one of the heartwarming times when a royal guard gently, quietly, and respectfully broke character, only to honor someone who truly deserved it. Days at the palace are usually filled with a calm rhythm. Guards march in perfect patterns, visitors walk around with excitement, and cameras click non-stop. But every once in a while, something happens that breaks the routine and stays in people's hearts for years. One such moment took place on a quiet morning when the sky was soft and gray. The air felt gentle, and the palace grounds were peaceful, almost as if the day itself was waiting for something special to happen. Crowds slowly gathered near the gates as the changing of the guard ceremony approached. This ceremony was something many visitors looked forward to. It was a moment where discipline, history, and tradition all came together. People gathered early so they could find the perfect spot to watch. Some leaned on the railings, some stood on their toes, and some held their phones high, trying not to miss a single movement. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary day at the palace. Families took photos, friends smiled for the camera, children waved, hoping someone in uniform would notice. But within the crowd was another small family that stood out for a special reason. They moved carefully, gently making their way toward the front, helping their child who had a mobility challenge. The child, a boy around 9 or 10 years old, had a warm smile and curious eyes. He held on to his walking aid, trying his best to keep up with the crowd. His parents stayed close, offering him support with every step. They wanted him to enjoy the visit just like any other child. But moving through the crowd was not easy for him. Sometimes the ground felt uneven, sometimes people accidentally stepped in front of him, and sometimes he had to pause to catch his breath. His parents reassured him with soft words. They told him to take his time and enjoy the moment. The boy nodded with determination. He was excited to see the royal guards. He had watched videos of them online and dreamed of seeing them in person. He loved the way they marched so neatly and how they could stand still without moving even a little. Today was finally his chance. After a few minutes of careful steps, they reached a place where the boy could see clearly. He looked up at the guards with wide eyes, amazed at their posture, their uniforms, and the quiet strength they carried. The boy's smile grew brighter. He tried to stand straighter, almost copying their pose. His parents laughed softly and hugged him from the side. They wanted a picture to remember this day. Not just any picture, but one where the boy stood proudly in front of the guards. The father pulled out his phone and prepared the camera. The boy positioned himself with excitement. But as the father tried to take the photo, he noticed that the angle wasn't right. Too many people were in the way, the lighting felt off, and the background didn't look clear. He moved to the left, then to the right, trying to find a better angle. Still, something seemed wrong. The boy tried to shift a little to help, but balancing wasn't easy for him. His legs trembled slightly, and he held onto his aid with both hands. His mother gently supported him, whispering encouraging words. The father apologized quietly as he kept adjusting, feeling bad for taking too long. People nearby noticed the family's effort. Some stepped aside to create space, but it still didn't help much. The guard behind them stood tall and still, completely focused on his duty. He had watched countless visitors take photos over the years and had never reacted. But today was different. The guard could see the boy struggling. He understood how much effort the child was putting into standing straight, even for a moment. And though guards are trained not to interact unless necessary, they are also trained to observe carefully. They are aware of the smallest details happening around them, especially when someone needs a little help. The guard did not move quickly or dramatically. Instead, he made a very small, very subtle adjustment, one that most people would not even notice. He shifted his stance just one step to the side, barely more than a few inches. It was such a tiny motion that his posture remained perfect, his expression stayed calm, and his duty remained complete. But for the boy's family, that little shift changed everything. Suddenly, the father's camera captured the perfect angle. The guard was visible behind the boy, centered and sharp. The lighting matched beautifully. There were no distractions in the frame, no people blocking the view. The scene looked almost magical. The father took the picture, checked it, and his eyes softened with gratitude. The mother smiled widely and gently touched the boy's shoulder. The boy himself noticed the difference. He looked back at the guard with pure admiration. Even though the guard didn't smile or speak, the boy could feel the kindness behind that small adjustment. The crowd nearby seemed to sense something special had happened. Some people whispered softly to each other. They understood that guards rarely make any movement outside of their duty, and for a guard to shift position just to help a child without breaking character was something truly heartwarming. The boy's parents looked at the guard with deep appreciation. They didn't speak out loud, but their expressions said everything. The guard, however, stayed perfectly still again, continuing his duty as if nothing had happened. But the warmth of the moment stayed in the air, turning an ordinary day into something memorable. The boy kept smiling long after the photo was taken. He stood proudly, looking up at the guard with respect. He whispered to his mother, "He helped me." His mother nodded lovingly, brushing his hair back and telling him that kindness can appear in the smallest actions. The rest of their visit felt lighter, happier. They walked around with smiles that didn't fade. Every few minutes, the boy would look at the photo on the phone again, admiring it, knowing that the guard had cared enough to help him, even without saying a single word. Other visitors who had seen the moment were touched too. They talked quietly about how one small, thoughtful gesture could brighten a child's entire day. Some said it was the purest moment they had seen during their visit. Others said it reminded them to look for kindness in unexpected places. Meanwhile, the guard continued his schedule without missing a beat. He returned to his original position shortly after, making sure everything still aligned with the rules. His face remained calm, his posture remained firm, but behind that serious exterior, he carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference for someone who needed it. The incident might have seemed tiny to some, just a small step, barely noticeable. But to the family, it was a gift. To the boy, it was a moment he would remember forever. And to everyone who witnessed it, it was another example of the gentle humanity that exists even within the strictest traditions. Sometimes the kindest acts are the smallest ones. They don't require words. They don't need attention. They simply come from the heart. And for that little boy, the Royal Guard's tiny step created a memory more precious than anything money could buy, a simple reminder that even in places filled with rules and discipline, kindness can always find its way quietly into the world. After moments like the ones the guards experienced with the little girl, the elderly man, and the young boy, life at the palace continued with its usual rhythm. The guards returned to their positions, the crowds shifted and changed, and the day moved forward. But something invisible lingered in the air, something kind, warm, and quietly powerful. These experiences touched not only the visitors, but also the guards themselves, even though their faces never revealed a thing. The guards were trained to stay serious, but they were still human beings, and human beings always feel something when kindness passes through them. Even though they could not express their feelings out loud, the small experiences stayed with them. They carried those moments in their hearts, tucked away like gentle reminders of why their job was more than just standing still. It was also about watching over people, noticing their struggles, and helping in ways that fit within the rules of their duty. One particular day, something happened that showed just how human and thoughtful the guards could be, even when they had to follow strict discipline. It began early in the afternoon, when the sunlight was soft and golden. Visitors filled the courtyard with cheerful conversations, and camera shutters clicked like tiny musical notes in the air. A new guard had recently joined the rotation. He was young, filled with pride, and determined to perform his duties with perfect accuracy. His uniform was spotless, his posture straight, and his training fresh in his mind. He had heard stories about moments when guards quietly helped visitors, but he had never experienced such a moment himself. He wondered what he would do if he ever faced a situation that required both discipline and compassion. He didn't have to wonder for long. A small family approached the front of the palace gates. There were 4 of them, a mother, a father, and 2 children. The younger child, a boy around 7 years old, held his mother's hand tightly. His older sister carried a notebook filled with little drawings she had made of the palace and guards. The family seemed cheerful, but there was something gentle and careful about the way they moved. The younger boy had a slight difficulty walking, something that made his steps slower and more uneven than others. But he tried his best to keep up with his family, smiling proudly every time he managed a few steady steps. His parents stayed close to him, offering encouraging words whenever he needed them. The family had come for a special reason. It was the boy's dream to draw a picture of a royal guard while standing right in front of them. He had been practicing drawing at home for weeks. His sister helped him by tracing the shape of the tall hat, and his father showed him photos online so he could learn the details. Today, he wanted to create a drawing from real life, something he could look at later and say, "I did this myself." The family reached a good spot where the boy could see the guard clearly. The mother helped him sit on a small portable stool she carried for him. His sister opened her notebook to a fresh page and placed it on his lap. The boy's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from excitement. He held his pencil tightly and looked up at the guard with admiration. He began to draw, slowly and carefully. His strokes were light and delicate. He looked up every few seconds, comparing the guard's posture with the lines on his paper. His family watched him with soft smiles. The boy, however, was not satisfied at first. He erased lines, redrew them, and erased them again. His determination was sweet and strong. But as he tried to sketch the guard's face, he found it difficult to see clearly. The sunlight had shifted, and shadows fell across the guard's features. The boy squinted, trying to move his head for a better view. His sister tried blocking the sun with her hand. But the shadow made the picture confusing for him. The boy sighed softly, disappointed that his drawing wasn't turning out the way he hoped. His parents encouraged him to take his time, but he still struggled. He wanted his drawing to be perfect, something he could be proud of. The guard, standing tall, saw this happening out of the corner of his eye. He couldn't move freely and he couldn't bend down or speak, but he understood what the child was trying so hard to do. He also understood that small gestures, when done respectfully and subtly, could make a big difference for someone. The guard studied the boy's difficulty without moving his head. He noticed exactly where the sunlight was landing. He could not change the position of the sun, but he could change his own position just a little, enough to help the child see clearly. Then, with a slow and careful movement, the guard shifted his foot just half an inch. It was such a tiny motion that most of the crowd didn't notice. It did not break any rules. It did not disturb his formation, But that half-inch shift changed the angle of the shadow on his face. Suddenly, his features were lit more evenly. The shadow disappeared just enough for the boy to see clearly again. The boy's eyes brightened instantly. "I can see him now," he whispered happily to his sister. He began drawing again with renewed energy. His lines became smoother, his focus sharper. His family watched with relief and joy. The sister smiled at the guard, knowing exactly what he had done, even though the guard did not look back. The mother placed her hand over her heart. The father nodded respectfully, understanding the meaning of such a tiny gesture. The boy's drawing improved beautifully. He sketched the tall hat, the straight uniform, the polished buttons, and the steady boots. His pencil moved gracefully over the paper, guided by excitement rather than frustration. Every few moments he looked up, studying the guard's shape with care and admiration. When he finally finished, he held up the drawing for his family to see. His face glowed with pride. It was not a perfect drawing, but it was filled with effort, hope, and heart. His family cheered softly, congratulating him. His sister hugged him, and his parents kissed the top of his head. The boy looked up at the guard one last time. Though the guard didn't move, the boy felt as if he had been quietly supported in a special way. He whispered, "Thank you," even though he knew the guard could not reply. The guard returned to his original position when the sunlight shifted again. His posture stayed firm, but inside, he felt a quiet sense of warmth. It was the kind of feeling that doesn't need words or expressions. Just knowing he had helped was enough. Visitors nearby also noticed the moment and smiled. They whispered to each other about how thoughtful the guard had been. Some even said that such small acts of kindness were what made their visit truly unforgettable. As time passed, the area around the palace continued to fill with tourists. The guard returned to his strict routine. His movements remained disciplined, his face serious. But the silent, heartwarming exchange between him and the little artist had already become a memory, a gentle reminder that kindness does not always need to be loud or big. Sometimes, it is simply a half-inch step, a small shift, a quiet thought, a gesture no one expects, but everyone remembers. Moments like these prove that behind every uniform, behind every rule, there is a human being who cares, quietly, sincerely, and beautifully. Even though thousands of people visit the palace every week, most visitors walk away with similar memories. Photos of the grand gates, short videos of the changing of the guard, and stories of how still and serious the guards look. But every so often, a visitor leaves with something much more meaningful, something that cannot be captured fully in a camera, something that stays in the heart as a gentle reminder that kindness exists in the most unexpected places. The moments when royal guards quietly break character are rare. They do not happen every day. They do not happen for attention. They happen because the guards, beneath their stiff uniforms and serious faces, are human beings who care deeply, and sometimes care finds its way through even the strictest traditions. Stories like the girl with the lost balloon, the elderly veteran who received a returned salute, the young boy trying to pose for a photo, and the child drawing from his small stool. These moments spread far beyond the palace walls. People who witnessed them shared the stories with their families, with friends, and with strangers they met on their travels. Slowly, these small acts began to ripple across the world like gentle waves of warmth. The little girl who had lost her balloon grew up remembering not the balloon flying away, but the kindness of the guard who picked up her toy bear. Her parents kept the photo of that day in a small album. The girl sometimes opened the album when she felt sad or unsure, just to look at the picture of herself holding the teddy bear that had been returned to her. The guard never knew how much his small gesture meant, but it became one of the girl's most comforting memories. It taught her that even when something goes wrong, kindness can appear in unexpected ways. The elderly veteran who had raised his trembling hand never forgot the moment the guard returned his salute. His family later said that it was one of the most meaningful experiences of his later years. They framed a photo of that moment and placed it in his living room. Whenever visitors came, he would point to the photo with a gentle smile and say, "That day reminded me that respect still lives strongly in this world." The guard had simply followed a feeling of respect, but his small gesture touched a heart that had carried decades of memories. The young boy who struggled with posing for a photo often talked about the guard who shifted just a little to help him look good in the picture. His parents kept that picture framed on their wall. It showed him standing proudly in front of the guard, smiling with all his heart. When the boy felt unsure of himself or doubted his strength, his mother would point to the photo and remind him, "See, even people who seem strong and serious notice your efforts." The guard didn't know that his small step helped a child build confidence, but it did. And the little artist who sat on his stool, drawing with all his concentration, kept his sketch as one of his most precious treasures. When he showed it to his classmates, he proudly explained how the guard had shifted to help him see better. The children listening were surprised that a guard who looked so strict could do something so thoughtful. For the little artist, that half-inch shift became a symbol of encouragement, proof that even small dreams matter and people care even when they cannot speak. Back at the palace, life continued with the same routine. Guards marched, visitors gathered, photographers clicked their cameras. But the memory of these small, meaningful moments remained in the hearts of those who experienced them. They became stories told on quiet evenings, shared during long car rides, and written into travel diaries. They became little lessons children learned about kindness and respect. The guards themselves, though they kept their expressions still, carried these moments too. A guard may not show emotion, but he feels it deeply. When he sees a child smile because of something he did, or a family express silent gratitude, he stands a little taller inside. He knows that his duty is not only about discipline, sometimes it is also about being a quiet protector of happiness. Every guard who has ever gently broken character remembers that moment forever. It becomes part of their own story. When they look back on their service years later, they may not remember the thousands of ordinary days, but they remember the one day they helped a child, or lifted an elderly visitor's heart, or made a small difference. These memories become soft, treasured pieces of their own journey. For the visitors who witness these gestures, it changes their understanding of the guards completely. They stop seeing them as statues in uniforms and start seeing them as strong, disciplined individuals with warm hearts. They realize that behind every serious expression is a story, a family, a person with experiences and emotions just like anyone else. It reminds people that kindness does not always come in big, dramatic actions. Sometimes it is a subtle glance, a slight step, a small hand movement, or a moment of understanding. These are the kinds of gestures that touch hearts quietly and deeply. As the sun sets on the palace grounds each evening, shadows stretch long across the stone pathways. Visitors leave with smiles, guards finish their shifts and return to their resting rooms, and somewhere in the world, someone is telling a story, not about the palace itself, but about a guard who showed kindness when no one expected it. These are the stories that travel far and wide, stories that make people feel hopeful, stories that remind us that even in places filled with rules and discipline, there is always room for gentleness. In the end, it isn't the strict posture or the shiny uniform that makes people admire the royal guards the most. It is the moments when their humanity shines through, even in the smallest ways. These heartwarming moments become memories people keep forever, not because they were grand, but because they were real. And so, the palace continues to stand tall, watching over the city. The guards continue their duty with calm focus. Visitors continue to gather, hoping to witness the perfect stillness of the guards. But every now and then, Someone gets to see something even more special, a quiet act of kindness that breaks through tradition like a gentle ray of sunlight. A silent smile in the heart, a tiny step that makes a big difference, a moment of understanding shared between strangers. These are the memories that last. These are the moments people treasure. These are the reasons the world loves the Royal Guards, not only for their discipline, but for their unexpected warmth.